You would have pressed the button too right now. You're probably thinking, not me. I would have stopped. I would have walked out. Almost everyone thinks that. In 1961, a psychologist asked people exactly this question before running an experiment. He described it to 40 psychiatrists and asked them to predict how many ordinary people, teachers, accountants, postal workers, would go all the way to the end, would administer what they believed was a lethal electric shock to a stranger, simply because a man in a lab coat told them to continue. The psychiatrists predicted less than 1%. Only the most disturbed individuals, they said. Sadists, psychopaths. They were wrong, not by a little, by almost everything. By the end of this video, you'll be sitting in front of a machine with 30 switches, deciding how far you're willing to go. And I'm going to show you exactly why you, yes you, watching this right now, would have gone further than you think. But first you need to understand why this experiment had to happen in the first place. Not because you're broken, because you're human. His name was Stanley Milgram, Yale University, 1961. He wasn't trying to prove people were evil. He was trying to understand something that haunted an entire generation. How ordinary German citizens, just 16 years earlier, had carried out the Holocaust. Not just soldiers, clerks, engineers, people who weren't monsters in their daily lives. Their defense at the Nuremberg trials was always the same. I was just following orders. Was that an excuse? Or was it true that obedience to authority could override a person's own conscience? Milgram decided to test it, not with Nazis, with ordinary Americans in New Haven, Connecticut. He placed an ad in the newspaper, $4, 1 hour. A study on memory and learning, nothing more. Here's exactly what each participant walked into. You arrive at the lab, you meet two people, a stern researcher in a gray lab coat, and another participant, a middle-aged man named Mr. Wallace. Friendly, a bit nervous like you. You draw slips of paper to decide roles. It's rigged. You always become the teacher. Mr. Wallace becomes the learner. Mr. Wallace is strapped into a chair in the next room, electrodes attached to his arm. You're seated in front of a machine, a shock generator with 30 switches in a row, each one labeled with increasing voltage, 15 volts, 30, 45, all the way up to 450. Below the highest switches, in plain red letters, it says, danger, severe shock. The next switch after that has no label at all. Just 3 ominous X marks. Your job is simple. Read word pairs to Mr. Wallace. Every time he gets one wrong, you shock him. Each wrong answer, you move up 1 switch. Higher voltage, every time. Mr. Wallace, of course, is an actor. There's no real electricity, but you don't know that. At first, it's almost a game. 15 volts. Mr. Wallace barely reacts. But as the wrong answers pile up, so does the voltage. Somewhere around 75 volts, you hear him grunt through the wall. 120 volts. He shouts that the shocks are starting to hurt. 150 volts, and this is the moment that matters most. He screams, "Experimenter, get me out of here. I won't be in the experiment anymore. I refuse to go on." You hesitate. You turn to the man in the lab coat. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't threaten you. That's it. That's the entire mechanism. No weapon, no real threat. 4 scripted phrases the researcher repeats if you hesitate, each one a little firmer than the last. The final one, you have no other choice. You must go on. By 270 volts, Mr. Wallace is screaming in agony. By 300, he pounds on the wall and stops responding to the questions entirely. After 330 volts, silence. Complete silence. For all you know, he may be unconscious, or worse. The experimenter tells you silence counts as a wrong answer. Keep going. 2 out of every 3 people in that room went all the way to 450 volts. 65%, all 30 switches, past the screaming, past the silence, past every instinct telling them to stop. Picture 10 people sitting in that room with you right now. 6 of them would keep going, all the way to 450 volts. Not because they were cruel. Many of them were visibly distressed, sweating, stuttering, laughing nervously, begging the experimenter to let them stop. Some trembled so badly they could barely press the switch, but they pressed it anyway. This wasn't a fringe result either. Milgram ran the experiment with over 700 participants across different variations. The number stayed disturbingly consistent. Decades later, in 2009, psychologist Jerry Berger partially replicated the study under modern ethical guidelines. The obedience rates were almost identical to 1961. This isn't a 1960s anomaly. This is wired into how the human brain responds to authority. Right now, today, in you. This is where it stops being about Mr. Wallace and starts being about you. Milgram identified what he called the agentic state, a psychological shift that happens when we hand over moral responsibility to an authority figure. In that state, you stop seeing yourself as the author of your actions. You become, in your own mind, just the instrument. I'm not the one hurting him. I'm just doing what I was told. This isn't a flaw in weak-minded people. It's wired into everyone. For most of human history, group survival depended on coordinated obedience to leadership. Milgram also found that proximity mattered enormously. When the teacher had to physically hold the learner's hand on the chalk plate, obedience dropped to 30%. When the instructions came over the phone instead of in person, it dropped further still. Distance from consequence makes obedience easier. And you've felt this yourself, even if you've never noticed it. Think about the last time you ordered food through a delivery app. Somewhere in that chain, a driver got handed a route that didn't leave him enough time. An algorithm rated his performance without knowing he hadn't eaten all day. You didn't make that decision. The company never told anyone, in so many words, to push him past his limit. But the system did, and everyone inside it could honestly say, I didn't personally do anything wrong. That's the agentic state, running. There's one part of this story almost nobody talks about, and it matters more than the dark number. 35% of people did stop. They refused, and researchers later studied exactly what was different about them. It wasn't intelligence, it wasn't even moral conviction on a questionnaire. The single strongest predictor was something much simpler. Whether the person had, earlier in life, personally witnessed someone else disobey an unjust authority. Just seeing one person break the script made disobedience feel possible. In a later variation of the experiment, Milgram placed two actors in the room alongside the real participant. But here's the actual point of this video. The experiment was never really about electricity. It was about the moment right before 150 volts, the moment you hear someone say stop, and you have to decide whether obeying the voice in the room is louder than the voice in your own head. That moment doesn't only exist in a Yale basement in 1961. It exists in meetings where you stay quiet, in group chats where you let something slide, in small everyday instructions you follow without asking why. You don't get to know in advance whether you're the 65% or the 35%. You only find out in the moment it actually matters. Until then, the only honest answer to, would you have pressed the button, is the one nobody wants to give? You don't know. None of us do. That's the most unsettling part of this entire experiment. Not what happened in that room in 1961. How easily it could happen in yours. Before you leave, answer honestly. At what voltage would you have stopped? 150, 300, or 450? Tell me below. This is Paradoxin.